Hello everyone, this is The Station, a podcast series coming to you directly from the Charles Darwin Research Station, where we will dive into stories of science and wonder from the Galápagos Islands. Today, for World Turtle Day, we have Courtney Pike, joining us from the Galápagos Tortoise Movement Ecology Program. So, hi Courtney, how are you?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So actually, I wanted to go back from the beginning with you. You've been with us for almost a year or so with the program. I think you were before with Filornis and all the other conservation programs as well. Where do you come from? What's your background?
So I'm actually from a small town in southern Illinois, which is near St. Louis, Missouri, in the US. And I did my bachelor's and master's in St. Louis. And after my master's, I came down here to volunteer and ended up staying on doing work with Filornis downsy and land birds related to invasive species management and health.
Awesome. And today with the tortoise program, what are you doing in a bigger picture in general? What do you say?
So we're studying movement ecology, so migration patterns and smaller movements across the islands. Specifically 3 different islands with 4 different species currently. And additionally, we're looking at the health of giant tortoises and doing some studies on reproduction. Along with that, we have other collaborators here or coming here that do research with the roles of giant tortoises in the ecosystem and human-tortoise interactions. Additionally, we also provide education to the local communities to inspire them to help conserve giant tortoises here.
So you probably are in the field a lot, of course. So what's your regular day like going on the field with tortoises?
Actually, I would say it's a big misconception that the principal investigator or leader of a project is actually hands-on in the field every day. We have a lot of administration work too. So actually I'm kind of more behind the scenes with the permits, the fundraising, and kind of organizing the overarching project from above. But we have 2 field assistants, field researchers that are in the field every day. And I do join them quite often to try to collect samples, to monitor giant tortoises, both adults and juveniles. So a typical day, if I am in the field, is waking up around 5 in the morning. Quite early, not exactly your ideal time to wake up sometimes, but it has to happen. And leaving around 6 a.m. to try to beat the hot heat as well, so that at least we can start hiking to our field sites, which are quite far. Even once we park a car or park a motorcycle, we still have to hike quite a long distance sometimes. So in one of our recent studies that has been over a 3-year period. Recently, we've been monitoring nests of giant tortoises in eastern Santa Cruz. And so we have to hike in probably an hour and a half just to get to the field site where there are nests of giant tortoises that we were monitoring to identify during the incubation phase where females were laying the eggs and protect the nest. And then in the hatching season, which was more January to about May, we were actually monitoring them for once the hatchlings are leaving the nest and quantifying how many survive and taking samples for genetic research. And so a typical day would be hiking in an hour and a half, spending about 5 hours walking around and trying to monitor nests, or also looking for other tortoises in the area, especially females, to download GPS data. Not really taking breaks so much, but trying to eat some snacks in between and survive the heat and then hike back about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So that's a typical day in the field along with all the other administrative duties.
Oh, awesome. So you go to the highlands and we know this time of the year is already getting a little bit drier. It's not raining much, but these past few weeks and months were a little bit rainy. So you also get this inclement on rain season on the highlands and everything gets very muddy, right?
Yeah.
So how is your experience? What's been your weirdest, craziest experience right now, on the field, as fun, probably. I don't know if you have something very memorable. I think those are the most crazy things and the fun parts to be a scientist, right? The fun part, you need to have the fun part.
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily due to rain or specific climate, but I would say that one of my most memorable moments, even in the past, has been 9 or 10 months that I've been part of the program, was actually climbing Volcan Alcedo or Alcedo volcano in Isabella Island and seeing the tortoises inside the crater. So to me, that was kind of the most awe-inspiring moment of my life, I think,
Yeah.
to see these tortoises surviving, and not only surviving, but thriving in these really remote conditions inside the crater of a volcano that still has fumaroles or like smoky areas. And it's just insane. It's very, very, very cool.
And how do they survive? Like they feed there? Like what's inside the volcano like?
So it depends on the season, but when there's more vegetation in the upper area, there are tortoises that stay around the crater to forage. And then later with our GPS data from some of the tortoises, we've seen that they can migrate down the outside areas of the volcano, whereas others may stay just in the mid-elevation where there's vegetation around all year that they can forage on. So migration patterns and things just depend on individuals and could be preference or other aspects of their biology.
So you've seen like they go like in groups, or they go like more individual, like they open up, or they...
Based off of the patterns that we have, we don't have GPS on, say, every animal or everyone in, say, a family, etc., but they migrate separately. So some of them in some areas across the islands may have similar patterns of migration, but they're more individual, like migrating individually.
And why, like, what, like the main question is like, why is it so important to actually monitor this migration? Why is it?
Well, it's interesting just to see patterns of movement first, and that they do migrate, because I think many years ago, before this project started, that was something that was relatively unknown in Galapagos. And so just to understand their basic ecology and movements first was kind of a first step. Second is to figure out why. And so, of course, they're migrating because they're looking for food. So in some months of the year, especially during what we call Garua here, which is more the drier season, but with the fine mist, there's less vegetation in the lowlands, and so they have less food available. And so especially the larger tortoises need more food to have more energy to continue surviving. Of course, they can survive without water and food for some time, but they generally migrate up to the highlands during the drier months that there's not much vegetation in the low areas.
And then like that's when this happens. I don't know the variation, because I know that whenever it's colder, there's more females or males. I'm not sure how's that process. You're more clear on that one.
So the cooler and hotter part is not necessarily, it's not related to adults. It's actually related to when the eggs are developing and the temperature dependent sex selection per se, or sex determination. And so you have cool dudes and hot chicks or females. So if the temperature is in the nest cavity, which is mainly just a hole in the soft soil in the lowland areas, if it's I believe it's about 28.5 or so, below that is actually more likely to have all males, and above that it's more likely and actually it can help produce more females.
Okay. That is very interesting. I know that happens also with sea turtles as well. I think so. Yeah. So, well, that's your field work, and that's the fun part. I think so. But then when we go back to the office, your administrative work, as you said, like what is your daily basis? Like, what do you find interesting also, like being in the office? Because even if it's an office, we're in Galapagos, of course, so it's amazing to even work from an office here. So what do you like the most here? What are you enjoying, like being here in the research station as well?
Well, in the off moments of the work, so even at lunchtime, I can go swimming and go for a snorkel right next to the station. So that's kind of an added bonus, I would say, which makes the day more enjoyable too, even when you are working as well. During work, I would say it's still, for me, interactions with all the different departments, because we are a research project. I am leading it. We have other people working for my project specifically, but it takes a whole team from the research station in order to carry it out. So even day to day, I'm usually interacting with other departments such as fundraising, administration, accounting, etc. And so as a joint group, we all get to help support giant tortoise conservation.
And your team, like how many are you in right now in your program, and what are they doing like in general?
So right now it's me, and then we have Freddie Cabrera, who's a senior field assistant, and Christian Penafiel, who is also a field assistant. So they're the two that are mostly in the field, whereas I'm more administrative and then also helping with some of the scientific side as well. Additionally, we are a joint project with the park, the national park here, and with the St. Louis Zoo. So we have other collaborators that are more direct parts, including Sharon Deem, who is the head of the Institute for Conservation Medicine at the St. Louis Zoo. And so she provides the expertise and funding and some studies for the health aspect of giant tortoises, which is very important.
You've been to the St. Louis Zoo. I was there years ago.
Well, I lived in St. Louis,
Exactly.
so I had been there a few years, and I also helped them bring some equipment down even before I started with this project. So I guess I was already supporting a little bit, and had already met her before. So it's been very nice.
Yeah, it's a completely different city compared to what we're here in Galapagos.
Yes.
And personally, like what do you like to do off work? What is your day-to-day basis? Like how did you change your lifestyle from being in the US? Because of course it's way different from here. How did you change and adapt as well here?
Well, I've been here on and off since 2015, more or less, more living full-time, except for a couple of years abroad. And so my adaptation since I started this project was actually not so hard, but more many years ago. And so initially it was a bit more difficult, but also novel to say, oh, I'm going to ride my bike every day and I don't have a car. So at first it's very exciting, but then of course, you want to go somewhere far and it gets a bit more difficult. But adapting to the food took some time as well. I still don't eat fish soup for breakfast, but that's okay. My partner is from Guayaquil, so I do adapt to many of the Ecuadorian traditions, probably even more so because of the romantic interest here as well. But in general, it's been good. I think the biggest hurdle for me was when I moved here, I didn't speak Spanish. And so I was using Google Translate a lot and relying on a lot of other people to help me even interact with volunteers and students that I was overseeing, despite the language barrier. So after I started to pick up Spanish and could speak close to fluently, then I felt much more adapted and more comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. The language barrier can be a struggle here. But yeah, at least like Galapagos, it is fairly bilingual because of the tourism. So I think it is a little bit easier to work around.
You would think so,
Yeah.
but then you go to town and most of the local people in hardware stores where we have to buy supplies, you have to show photos because you don't know even now I speak Spanish and I don't know the words for things. Interacting with the ABG, which would be more for the biosecurity, also generally depends on the person. Usually you have to speak in Spanish. With the national park as well is mainly only Spanish speaking. So, and some of the staff at the CDF also, they don't speak English. So it's been, very, I would say a necessity to actually learn Spanish to be able to communicate with everybody more efficiently too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so you're mentioning like, yeah, you work with the ABG and which is the Agency of Biosecurity for the Galápagos Islands, and with the national park. And like, for example, yeah, you collect your samples and your data. Like, what do you do with them? Like, you provide the samples. How do they process? I'm not sure about that.
So with many of our studies, both in the past and now with the Giant Tortoise Project, a lot of studies are actually in collaborations with other institutions or universities abroad. And so specifically in this program, we are working with other universities, say Southern Illinois University, for a reproduction study. And so we're taking genetic samples, but then we're actually exporting them out of Galapagos, actually to a lab in Canada, which is also in collaboration with this university to do all the analysis. So we don't actually have sometimes the hands-on equipment here to be able to do all the processing in Galapagos.
Okay. And what are they doing over there with that data?
So the one in Canada will be doing a genetic analysis to determine paternity of the hatchlings that we have in nests in the eastern Santa Cruz species, like I was mentioning earlier. And then we have some other studies where we'll be looking at the microbiome of giant tortoise adults in the same species to look at differences in migratory patterns and how that influences gut bacteria and microbiome in the adults. And so those samples, say for that study, will go to the St. Louis Zoo and in addition to Washington University, which is in a collaboration for this project.
And you said you're working this with 4 different species here in Galapagos.
In general.
In general, yeah. And then like, why are they like, why are not you're not studying like the other ones, or is there a process? How did you select the turtles? I'm not sure.
Well, when I took over this program, it was something already established. And from my understanding, with the person that was the founder of the program, Steve Blake, he was interested in looking at differences in movement and migratory patterns across different, I would say, different islands and different elevation patterns. So it was more, in my understanding, to do a comparison. We'll say Santa Cruz, which has both arid zone and humid zone. You have Alcedo volcano, where the study was also taking place on movement and migration, and that has a very large gradient, up to like, I think 1,100 meters or so in yards. I'm not quite sure, but and so to see how they're migrating across a volcanic slope and compare that also to a more flat island, which has almost no elevational differences, which is Espanola. So for that reason, they were just selecting very specific sites to work with, and that has continued over the years.
And what is like the general, I don't know, conclusion, like within like the ones from Espanola compared to Alcedo ones? Which one migrates more, or do they
have? Espanola doesn't really migrate because it's a very small island, and there isn't much benefit to try to move so much because the vegetation is about the same no matter where you're going. So it's a lot of cactus, and then only in the wet season there's a little more vegetation, but they don't really move around so much. They're also limited by the size. Whereas in Alcedo volcano, the vegetation changes depending on the season, especially with more rain or drier seasons. So they have more of an advantage to migrate. So some do migrate down to the arid zone, potentially to nest as well if they're a female, and then migrate back up. So those are kind of some of the reasons to migrate or not to migrate. It's not always just a choice of the individual, but it really depends on the species and the island that they're on.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't gone on a field trip with tortoises. I really want to go. I should, yeah. But that is fun. And here in Santa Cruz, so here's like more like mid-size between Alcedo. I think so, right?
They still, I mean, Santa Cruz is not so high as Alcedo, of course, even in the highest point of the island. But giant tortoises, the adults are still migrating. Not all migrate. Males generally migrate, and generally, from my memory, during the dry season, when there's less vegetation in the lowlands or the arid zone near the coast, the males are moving up to the highlands, which is where there's still like lush vegetation all year, or a little more food available at least. For that reason. Whereas the females, it depends if they're going to nest. They will come down to the lowlands around June because that's where there's a more like soft soil and specific places where they can lay their eggs and nest. And after they nest, it could be 1 to 3, 4, 5 times, and they generally move back up to the highlands.
And they're really slow, of course, because of the tortoises. How long does it take them, like approximately? Of course, they probably make stops and everything, but how long does it take them like to migrate to one point to another?
It's a good question. I can't tell you exact time frames. I think Steve Blake might be able to tell you more on that, but I do know they can migrate, up to say 10 or 15 kilometers over time. And, you find a tortoise in one spot and you don't think it's going to show up, a few kilometers down, but just 3-4 days and it's already there. So under my expectations, I thought they would be very slow, but if they continue moving, they can actually move a long distance quite fast.
They'll get there.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, actually, thank you so much for joining us. It's been like very instructive. I don't know if you have like any other curiosities or something like you'd like to input here for our listeners and our viewers now.
I mean, we're learning more about juvenile movement and behavior and survival too, and so that's one thing that I think is very important to continue in our research over time, because there isn't much known about any of these aspects of the juveniles, especially the survival rates and what's influencing that. So that's one thing that we're working on right now, and we hope to expand over time. So.
What is juvenile? Like how old are they juveniles? Because they last for a while.
Well, we're monitoring them from the moment that they hatch. We put little radio trackers on a few of them, and then we monitor them. And right now we have, say, 10-year-old or 12-year-old juveniles. So, once they're not so babies, then they're more of a juvenile stage. But we are monitoring them right now up to about 12, 13 years old, and we hope to continue monitoring that over long term.
To see what happens. Okay. That is very interesting. Thank you so
stay tuned.
much. Stay tuned for the next one. Thank you so much, Courtney. It was really nice to have a really nice conversation with you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you to our viewers and listeners on this special episode. We will see you on our next one. And don't forget to like and share on your social media.